welcome back to the Who Are You to Lead Anyway podcast. Today, I have a real treat for you. But before I introduce my guest, I want to update you on one quick thing. If you listen to episode 88, Leadership Alchemy, where I talked about the Who Are You to Lead Anyway podcast roadmap, which is the tailored resource to support your growth journey, I just wanted to let you know that I've added the link to the show notes where it's going to live so that it's easier for you. Now, let me introduce you to my colleague and my friend. Fiorenza Rossini is a leadership, career change coach, and cross-cultural expert with a strong focus on helping clients become engaging leaders, navigating difficult situations, and dealing with challenging emotions and stress. Fiorenza has spent more than 10 years working side by side with business division executives in the fields of business management, change programs, operations, and financial regulations at fast-paced global organizations such as BNP Paribas, if I'm saying that correctly, and TPI-CAP. Fiorenza is based in London, UK, and I invited her on the podcast to have a conversation so that we could explore the nuances of belonging in the workplace, so that we can gain a better understanding of what it is, some practical insights for navigating challenges, and a sense of empowerment that we can actively cultivate our own sense of belonging in the various contexts that we're in. There is an article that I refer to within the context of our conversation, and I just wanted to let you know that I've linked that in the show notes as well. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Hello, Fiorenza Rossini. How are you?
Hi, Cynthia. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing very well and incredibly excited to just see your beautiful face and to be able to have this conversation with you today. I would love it so much if you would be so kind as to introduce who you are, what you do, and how we've come to be here today.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Yes, I'd love to. All right. So, well, like you said, my name is Fiorenza Rossini. I'm based in London, in the UK. I am a leadership coach, and I also coach on career change and transitions. Which means that I do lots of work with leaders to help them move towards the next step, or perhaps they have already moved to that next step and they're looking for some support and guidance. And I also support individuals that are going through change, such as a career change. It may be within the same industry or not, and also undergoing change with a global exposure. So what I mean by that is perhaps they've moved to a new country to work. So they're living there and they're working there, and so they're exposed to new cultures. And there can be, some great work to do there in terms of getting communications right, and also, the way of doing business. And also the other scenarios could be that perhaps you haven't moved, you haven't shifted your life in a different part of the world, but you have grown in terms of responsibilities, and you're looking after an international team, and therefore you may encounter similar issues, right? So you are working with new cultures now, and you'd like some support in that area. So that's what I do. As you may know, I have a podcast as well on belonging. Belonging has been my thread there, and the podcast is called The Belonging Project.
Yes.
And yes. What else can I say? Yes, of course. On the personal side, I mentioned I live in the UK. I'm also a mom to two children, very energetic both. So my son is 4-year-old and my daughter is 7 months old, and I've actually come back from maternity leave early March. So that is less than 2 months ago.
That is amazing. So, first of all, just congratulations. I don't think I noticed or was aware of that.
That's okay. No worries. Thank you.
That's amazing. So we have so many things in common just from the work that we do. The thing that brought us together, though, is this conversation about belonging. And so, for those listening, I invited Fiorenza to be here with us today so that we could have a conversation about that and how it might impact you as the leaders within the organizations that have teams, have, and even yourself. So we're just going to explore this conversation of belonging. So, Fiorenza, based on your belonging project, what is the thing that has been the most fascinating or intriguing thing that you have learned about belonging?
I love this question. So I would say just how much belonging is really unique to us, and how what we need to feel that we belong or to belong is really interlinked with our journey, personal journey, if we're talking about belonging in the personal space, or professional journey, or actually mostly both. And yes, we may have similarities, right? I'm sure that we can find some similarities between you and I, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there is always, something unique, and that very much seems to be intertwined even with our journey. And that's been really fascinating to explore. And I've been exploring this with my podcast. It's really the purpose of the podcast, and having conversations about it with people from different backgrounds, or perhaps that can bring a perspective that I cannot bring because of my personal journey and all that, or
Mm-hmm.
professional journey. And there's always something that someone has never said before. And yeah, it's been what, maybe, I think we are in the episode 40, 45, something like this. Yeah, and that still happens. So yeah, this is it. This is what is really fascinating for me.
What has led you to this purposeful, meaningful podcast for you?
Hmm. So belonging has always been a point of reflection for me, even when I wasn't able to articulate it. I think, it was the case, and I was thinking about it. So I guess taking a very step back, I grew up in France, and my parents are not French. So we had, well, mostly the Italian culture, but we also had a bit of kind of Turkish culture in the family. And so what it meant is that we had, home life, and then I guess the outside with the, main culture, which was
Mm.
the French culture, because we were living in France. And um, so from early on, I was exposed to more than one culture. And obviously, you don't really realize it as a child. You just think that that's it. Everyone is like you, or is having the same experience. Um, and the language point was, or the language angle was probably my first experience or recollection of getting that awareness that actually there's something going on, right? That's how I was probably
Yeah.
putting it in my mind at the time. That there was something going on at home that was different from my friends at school, for example. And so yeah, so that was the first kind of point. And then obviously growing up, and you go through teenage years, and right, you're a multicultural family and others are not, and your friends may not be. And it does mean that you're having a slightly different experience, right? With pros and cons, obviously. And I didn't necessarily have friends that had a similar,
Mm.
I guess, multicultural family. And I think that, yeah, that part would have probably changed everything, right? In a way. We didn't have family or close family next to us. So, that kind of also made things different. And I remember we, when I moved to the UK, so years later, it was, after my master's, I was actually in my first job. I met this friend very randomly, how we've met. And it turned out that we had a very similar story. We met in London. We were working in the same industry. We grew up in the suburbs of Paris, and her family was from the same town my family was in Italy. And we
Mm.
just like we looked at each other, and we had to click, and we clicked, and we are still very good friends now. But there was so much of that shared experience, which was amazing to see, right? Almost like, oh, actually, yes, you get it in a way. um yes, so this very early on reflection made belonging something important for me, and finding my own way to belong. So obviously, when you go through teenagers, belonging is a very important point, right? Or rather, you want to fit in. And one thing that was very difficult for me, and now it's more spoken about, so that's good, but it wasn't necessarily in those days. So my name is Italian. My name doesn't sound French. And so I would go to parties with friends of friends, people that wouldn't necessarily know me, and they would ask my name, and then they would say, "Oh, so where are you from?" Well, I'm from here, right? And I had that growing up, kind of in my teenage years, and also later on when I was in university, and it was very tiring, and I wasn't able to label it. But yes, it kind of put me in that outsider thing at a very tender age, where you're really trying to find about who you are, and just stuff about yourself, and then you get that question. And it wasn't helpful, obviously, but also it it's not great to have to get asked that question at any time, but especially when you're so young. It's I find it difficult.
To be asked like where you're from.
Yes, because I was from there, and
Yeah.
there wasn't really much to say.
Well, so it's what's fascinating to me, and I didn't expect actually the similarities as I was listening to you. Because although, I mean, I wouldn't say my family is we're Caucasian. That's what we are. However, I came from a very small town in Newfoundland, which is it's a small province. And when I was 6, my parents moved for work to a different province. And so what that meant was I attended school in in a different location where we didn't have any of the support. So when you talked about like the move, I was like, that's fascinating. I've had a very similar experience. And when people would ask me, like, well, where are you from? Because I sounded funny, I had an accent, right? To them, I sounded funny. I had an accent. And I kept getting the question, well, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? A little earlier than you did. So it seems like there's some similarities that I actually didn't expect or anticipate. So I say that because I'm also curious about how many other experiences you've come across, especially in the work that you're doing, with raising awareness to belonging about that.
Do you mean about myself personally, or about
Well,
my clients?
similar journeys, right? So, and here's the what's driving my question is I think oftentimes we desire to belong, to feel as though we belong, and we feel that we're not. belonging for
Mm.
some reason, some way, maybe something we think, we say, we do that might be different than what other people think, say, and do. And how are we creating our experience with that?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Professionally, I was working in corporate before um, switching to coaching. I was working in investment banking, and you know things were working well. I didn't switch careers because I hated my job, but
Yeah.
really because really because I wanted to find my vocation, right? Something that
Mm.
really was an extension of me. And the energy is completely different. And I had amazing days in my corporate job, and I can see now that yes, they were amazing days, but what I really me, um, yes, meh, not sure, right? I think people had glimpses of me, and there was also much more that I don't, I didn't feel was appropriate, creative stuff, or yeah, mostly around the creativity, and I mean that with a capital C, right? So I'm not talking about, handmade stuff. No, just like
Yeah.
generally the field of creativity. And when I when I switched to coaching, and actually even before that, when I was going through my coach training, I remember feeling like, wow, those are my people. Those are
Hmm.
my tribe. And it was a completely new feeling, you know, professionally, and actually even just generally, right? It was the first time that I was meeting a group of people that really seemed to get me, and to share some similar perspectives in terms of the work we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And also there was so much difference in what got us where we were in that same room,
Mm.
let's say. But at the same time, there were lots of similarities. And that was amazing. And that for me was really a big moment on my belonging journey. Yeah, I'll stop here for now.
So around what from a timeline perspective, here's what I'm hearing. It's as though within your journey, you're getting closer and closer to belonging, to this feeling of belonging, to this sense of belonging, both within yourself and
Mhm.
within your vocation,
Yeah.
your impact. That's what I'm hearing. What out of that might be true or might not be?
Mm. It is. And the other big piece on my journey, and that's its own journey as well. The motherhood has been huge, and obviously finding my style and finding my way, and the overthinking that I'm doing as well. Um, and it's been amazing to add that new identity, which I
Mm.
feel I belong to, right? Um, my children are still very young, so I'm sure it's gonna evolve in different ways. Um, but yes, that's also a big
Yeah.
piece of the journey.
Do you think, I'd be just really curious to hear your perspective on this. Do you think that as an individual, that we can choose to belong or not?
Well, certainly there have been circumstances or situations when I've decided that, yeah, I don't belong here.
Mm,
I
yes.
can, you know, be here, but I'm I don't want to belong. And I think it's not easy to get to that point or to get to that mindset, because perhaps you may have been brought up in a way that you smile and you want to be friendly and you want to have a nice conversation. Yeah. And then that's great, and then you may decide that actually, yeah, not everyone is meant to be. What is it that I want to say here? I guess it's okay to find yourself with a group of people or in a situation, in a context where you decide that you can be there, but you don't want even to belong. It's a active
Mm-hmm.
choice.
Yeah. Well, I'm being reminded of the work that Brene Brown does around like fitting in and belonging.
Mhm.
And at least for me, when I've made the decision to like not belong or to belong, either one, even though I had made the decision to belong, talk about that one first, there was a lot of question, a lot of like second guessing, a lot of overthinking that like, did I make the right decision? Did I make the right decision? So the feeling didn't really come to me. Like even though I chose it, the feeling didn't come to me. And this would have been like earlier. And what I've learned along my own journey is I can decide now to belong, and I know how to do that a little bit better for myself. It's around finding the reasons that I would do that. And do I love the reasons for belonging where I am enough versus is this not really good for me? Right? Do I want to make a different decision? And I think it's just fascinating to when you talked about like the different identities that we have, like motherhood will probably invite you to wear, I guess that's the word that's coming up for me, like various identities that you can belong to as part of that. Like when you think about like associations and the things that your kids will do in the future and the version of you that will like unfold as you experience all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If
And the
if
fitting in versus belonging is so important. Um, and I guess alongside what I was saying earlier around you can choose not to belong in a place or in a setting, you can also decide that you're in this setting, I'm actually fitting in.
yes.
There may be a
Mhm.
purpose for it.
Mhm.
um,
Yes.
and I think if you're clear about it, it doesn't have the same impact. You're conscious, you're aware of what's going on, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we hopped on the call today, I took a look at just the stats of belonging. And according to the EY Belonging Barometer, almost half, so 41% of the respondents, this is in 2023, respondent workers at companies across the globe say that their workplace is where they feel the greatest sense of belonging, second to being at home.
Mm.
And yet, 75% feel excluded at work. What are your thoughts about that?
How old is the survey you said?
2023.
Okay, so it's quite recent.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a big number. Uh,
Yeah.
I was hoping that it would be slightly lower in 2023. Um, I'm seeing lots of what I would say positive initiatives
Mm-hmm.
in workplaces, talking more about mental health or really some programs and movements that are trying to remove the negative stigma around it. Some companies have been great at adopting work from home or hybrid policies. So I see things being done, and at the same time I am very surprised to see that some companies, for example, I'm going to just stay a little bit with the hybrid working situation. Some companies have had team members working from home throughout the pandemic and things were working well, for the company, not only
Mm-hmm.
for, the individuals. Yet we're out of the pandemic and they're demanding individuals to go back to the office on a full-time basis or almost a full-time basis. So there are things like this that may not seem, life-changing, but actually contribute to someone's sense of belonging, because we may not feel heard. We don't feel heard if
Yeah.
we are being turned down, if we put in a flexible working request. Yeah, there are things like this. There are things as well, how supported we may feel returning to work in an organization as a new parent, right? So I think this has been present before and it's still being the case now. And perhaps if you couple it with actually now you have to go to the office more, it's adding up. So while I am surprised that the stats are so high, I can see so many reasons why one may
Yes.
not feel that sense of belonging. We still have even, leaders being promoted because of their amazing technical skills and not because they are, good leaders. I'm saying good leaders in the sense that they have done a bit of work, right, to lead and not manage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still happening. So
Yes. I know, and it's interesting because I've had similar experiences within the context of the coaching work that I do, and it organizations I think don't necessarily put themselves in the shoes of the persons that they're asking to make the change, because even though it may not seem like quote unquote life changing to them, it actually is life changing to the person who is now being asked to do something different and having to structure their life in a way that they can actually meet those commitments. And it just, I think it, to your point, it's if individuals aren't feeling seen, heard, and acknowledged, which I think is really critical in belonging, how else are we supposed to feel?
Mm.
Like if you think about like anyone, like little children, I have grandchildren now, so I, I have actually, I think my grandson might be 1 month older than your daughter, right? And so for them, like when you see them, when you hear them, when you smile at them, like you can actually sense, or I can sense for myself, that they feel like they belong, even though they would never, of course, they're too young to articulate any of that. But you can
Yes.
almost see it just with that human, just looking at one another, just noticing that they're there and speaking to them and being present with them. It's very much a feeling. And I'm curious, like, how can we as coaches and as leaders of our own lives, and as we, listen, when we think about people that are listening to this episode, what advice or guidance do we have, or what message do you have for them? How do we help them foster this sense of belonging, create this sense of belonging, and maybe even for themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a crucial reflection to have as a leader,
Hmm.
especially so if you're leading a family, right? I'm saying, I
Hmm.
guess I'm using a leader with a capital L here, but also if you're a leader in your workplace, um, the starting point to me must be about yourself first and foremost. How do you it's even beyond how do you define belonging. It's really about perhaps first of all, what associations do you create with belonging? What do you need to see? What do you need to feel, um, to get that sense of belonging personally? Um, and there's really no right or wrong answers. And this is really something that I think we say a lot as coaches. But it's my favorite thing to say because it's a
It's a
great reminder,
it's a
right?
universal law, right? That there's no right or wrong.
Yes. But this being said, I guess as we go through school, right? There's the right answer and there isn't.
Yes.
So we have that sense of like we are getting asked the question, is this the right answer? Did I give you the right answer? So yeah, anyway, I love to just remind individuals of that. There's no right or wrong answer. So what association do you see with belonging? What do you need to feel? What do you need to see to give you that sense? And once you know the answers for yourself, once you've done that self-reflection, you'll be able to come to your team perhaps or your family with much more awareness, and also you'll be able to listen to what others will tell you about their own reflection and perhaps needs in a much open way, or it's just like you're able to listen way more and deeper. um and at that point, yes, the encouragement is to have that conversation, to invite others into the same reflection that you've had. And once the levels of awareness are present for everyone, what can you co-create, right? So
Mm.
if you ABC to get that sense of belonging, and your team needs FJI, then what can you do together? What can you co-create together? I don't think it's solely on the leader, right, to make sure that everyone belongs, because if someone doesn't want to belong or isn't interested in that, you can really make that happen for them. But the invitation, the first kind of opening the door, to me, has to come from the leader.
Mm. I would totally agree with that. It's let's lead by example, show the way, make the invitation. And maybe even from a curiosity perspective, or at least for me, I would
Mm,
be in that circumstance if I've made those invitations to belong. I mean, when I've led teams, we didn't speak in terms of belonging. I mean, that's more in the last, I'd say, decade, at least in my personal experience. But when I was leading teams, even though I wouldn't have described it that way, I was very much curious about like different behavior that would, like verbal, nonverbal, that I could tell someone didn't really feel like they were belonging.
yes.
And just even noticing that and having the awareness to have a conversation, just like as a human, like, hey, what's going on for you?
Mm,
Now, I've noticed this, I've noticed that. And so I think from a leadership perspective, I totally agree with you. And I think there's so many things that leaders can do to really foster and set the tone for that sense of belonging. Absolutely, they get to decide, but it's seemingly so important. Like if we're at work so much of our lives and we want to belong and yet we don't feel it, it actually doesn't seem like it's so hard. And yet it is.
mm,
Otherwise, the statistics wouldn't be what they are.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm curious, like what in your experience, what do you think gets in the way of that?
That's a great question. I again, I believe that having reflected on perhaps what we want to get out of the job or out of the position we are in may actually be helpful in getting us a better sense, a clearer sense of what would
Mm.
belonging in that role and position would look like for us. Um, and I have worked with people that they were at a point, so this is quite extreme, but some people may be actually too far gone, like they've had so many they may have some very important, strong needs, or that may not match what the company can offer.
Mm-hmm.
And you can work very hard on finding belonging in that position, but sometimes it's not possible. I do believe that.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I'm nodding because I absolutely believe it as well.
and I also think that with some work at other times in different situations, different people, and with some work, perhaps some self-work, some communication, some different ways of communicating, rather, we may actually get that sense of belonging, right? um, some organizations are able to hear, are able to listen what people are saying, but individual needs to say things as well, right? I think as well, sometimes we have those dreams, and I love those dreams, where we really want our boss to read us, right? You
You
know
mean
me,
they can't read our minds?
right? You know me. You should know what I need. You should know what I want, right? And
So good.
I've done that before. And then when it's not happening, you get into that loop in your mind, and you can get disappointed, and you don't belong. There's no way you can belong, right? um in those situations, well, firstly, that's an amazing scenario to work with a coach, but actually, to when you get to realize that people may know you very well, and you think that you may have implied things, right? Implied needs, wishes, what's important for you, aspirations, whatever. You can still work on getting that communication clearer and more actionable for them. And if you're able to unlock that, you may find a sense of belonging.
Yes.
And also,
Yes.
you'll feel happier probably in your job.
Yes. It's so interesting because it's really like asking for what you need. And another Brene Brown moment, like being clear is being kind, both for you and for the company or the leader that you're working with or the team that you're working with. Like really expressing your desire. Because at that point, what's the worst that could happen if you're already not feeling? I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It may not be nice to hear that, but I think it's true.
Well, but that also so too is being that is a part of being a leader, having the courage to step into and ask for what you need. We are not mind readers, and we'll never really know for sure until people tell us. And even then, sometimes, depending on the words that we choose, we may not be as clear with what our need is than we could be sometimes. Right? There have been times that I've asked for what I've needed, and then I was like, oh, actually, did I? Did I ask for exactly the thing that, like, did I even reflect on it enough to know what the need was? What am I looking for?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's just like bringing it back to the self and being really curious, like, what is the thing that you're wanting? And if in the context of belonging you don't feel you can belong, thinking about like what can you give yourself to help you belong a little bit more, at least until you're clear on what it is that you might need from your organization, and then having the conversation or the making the request.
Absolutely. And at times, as you are preparing to have that conversation, or perhaps you've started your reflection, you may realize that what you thought was the most important thing actually isn't, and there's something even more important to you. And that's also fascinating, because if you didn't take the time to prep for a crucial conversation, you may not have realized that, and you may have been thinking about something else, or thinking you wanted something else. And that's also another, very interesting
Yeah.
aspect of it.
So true. So good. So good for Fiorenza. So I know for you, you have a call coming up, so I want to be mindful of your time. From you to the listeners, any wisdom, guidance on belonging, or for them as someone who's either a new leader, emerging leader?
I would say really embrace the power of your own journey, and you may not think that even your you may not even think that your own journey has value, or that you have a journey because it's been smooth, or as you expect, or linear, whatever. But actually there is so much power in it, and it may take time to see it, and to be able to articulate it. But I really recommend keeping this somewhere in the back of your mind. And because your journey, or your personal, professional, your journey with the capital letter, is so much intertwined with your own journey towards belonging. Yeah, that's it.
I love that, and I think it's so true, and what I would add to that is, at least at this stage in my life, this is where I've come to. I think we are all just walking each other home. Somebody wonderful with lots more wisdom than I have said that. I can't remember who. But I feel like we are walking each other home, and all of us do have value. I think it's recognizing and owning that value, right? Really capturing the essence of like who we individually are, because your set of values, your uniqueness is different from mine, which is different from everyone else's. So that's the piece that I feel like from a belonging perspective is like getting more and more comfortable with oneself as we become through all the different stages of our journey.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that, Cynthia.
Fiorenza, this has been such an absolute pleasure to speak with you, to learn from you. I thank you so very much. And
Thank you
I
for
wish
having
you,
me. I really enjoyed this conversation, Cynthia.
if you have a second, just tell people where can they find you if they want to connect with you, learn more about you, your work, your podcast. I can link all the things up in the show notes, but to hear it from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cynthia. So we've mentioned my podcast, which is heavily focused on belonging from different perspectives and angles. You'll find my podcast called the Belonging Project podcast on any platform, any podcast platform. So it will be there. My website is growinnow.com, all in one word. And this is really my platform for my coaching work. So any questions, anything that resonates from that, there's also lots of articles that I've been writing. I always love to hear what resonates. So feel free to send me a note. And I appreciate, Cynthia, for this opportunity to talk more and deep dive on belonging. It's great not having to not being on my podcast where I have, my guest, and actually be the guest for once. That's very refreshing. Thank you.
You are welcome. It has been so fun. I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey there, it's Cynthia. Thanks for being a part of the Who Are You to Lead Anyway journey. Join my newsletter for exclusive updates and resources. Get a complimentary self-discovery workbook at www.cynthiajamesoncoach.ca. Your feedback shapes this show, so share your thoughts. And if you love the podcast, help spread the word. Thanks for investing in your leadership growth. Let's thrive together.